Two people lose their job on the same day. One falls into depression for 6 months. The other feels disappointed for a week and moves forward. What's the difference? It's not optimism. It's not resilience. It's something much more specific. The first person is demanding that this shouldn't have happened. The second person is preferring it hadn't happened. That one-word difference, demand versus prefer, changes everything. And I mean everything. Look, I spent my entire career helping people get over their emotional problems fast. Not 10 years of therapy, weeks or months. And the secret wasn't digging into childhood trauma or trying to feel better about yourself. It was teaching people one simple truth. Your demands about how life should be are creating your emotional disturbance. Here's what most people don't understand. You think your anxiety comes from that presentation at work. You think your anger comes from your spouse not listening. You think your depression comes from not achieving your goals. But that's not quite right. The event doesn't create the emotion. Your beliefs about the event create the emotion. Specifically, your demanding beliefs. When you say, I absolutely must succeed, or people have to treat me fairly, or life should be easier, you're setting yourself up for suffering. Not disappointment, not healthy sadness, but rage, anxiety, depression, and shame. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't want things. Want them, prefer them, work hard for them. But the moment you escalate that preference into an absolute demand, you're in trouble. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how to catch yourself demanding, how to dispute those demands, and how to replace them with flexible preferences that let you stay mentally strong no matter what 2026 throws at you. This isn't positive thinking. This isn't pretending everything's fine. This is straight up rational thinking that actually works. So let me start by showing you the 3 deadly demands that are probably running through your head right now without you even realizing it. These 3 demands cause almost all emotional disturbance. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. The first demand is about yourself. It goes like this. I absolutely must perform well and win approval, or else I'm worthless. Listen to that. You're not just saying I want to do well. You're saying I must, I have to, or I'm worthless. This demand creates anxiety before events and depression or shame after failures. Let me give you an example. You got a presentation at work. If you're thinking, I really want to do well on this presentation, and I'm going to prepare thoroughly, that's a preference. You'll feel some concern, some healthy nervousness that helps you prepare. But if you're thinking, I must ace this presentation, or I'm a total loser, that's a demand. And now you've got anxiety, real anxiety, the kind that makes your mind go blank, makes you avoid preparing because it's too scary to think about, or makes you so nervous you actually perform worse. See the difference? The demand doesn't help you. It hurts you. And here's the really destructive part. When you demand that you must perform perfectly, you're tying your entire self-worth to one event. You're saying if I fail at this, I'm a failure. Not I failed at this thing, but I am a failure as a human being. That's what I call a catastrophic evaluation. You're taking a bad performance and turning it into I am bad. And that's where the real suffering comes from. This demand shows up everywhere. Perfectionism, that's this demand. Procrastination, that's often this demand too, because you're so afraid of not being perfect that you avoid starting. Social anxiety, that's this demand screaming, I must win everyone's approval or I'm worthless. It's running your life and making you miserable. The second demand is about other people. It goes like this. You absolutely must treat me fairly and considerately, or else you're a horrible person. Now listen, I'm not saying you should accept mistreatment, but there's a huge difference between I want you to treat me well, and I'll address it if you don't, versus you absolutely must treat me well, or you're a terrible human being. This demand creates anger, not healthy annoyance, but rage and resentment. Let me give you an example. Your partner forgets to do something they promised. If you're thinking, I wish they had remembered, and I'm going to tell them, this is important to me, that's a preference. You'll feel some irritation, some healthy frustration, and you'll communicate clearly. But if you're thinking they absolutely must remember what I ask, and if they don't, they're a horrible, selfish person, that's a demand. And now you're furious. You're not just addressing the behavior, you're damning the entire person. See what happens there? You take someone's bad behavior and you turn them into a bad person. You go from you did something inconsiderate to you are an inconsiderate, terrible human being. That's what I call damnation. And it destroys relationships. Because now you're not solving a problem, you're attacking a person. And people don't respond well to being damned. They get defensive, they fight back, and nothing gets resolved. This demand shows up in relationships, at work, in traffic. Someone cuts you off, and instead of thinking, wow, that was dangerous and annoying, you're thinking that person absolutely should not have done that. They're a complete idiot who shouldn't be allowed to drive. And now you've got road rage. You've ruined your own day over something that lasted 3 seconds. That's the power of a demand. The third demand is about life and the world. It goes like this. Life absolutely must be easy and give me what I want, or else it's awful and I can't stand it. This is the demand that life should be fair, that things should work out the way you want, that you shouldn't have to struggle or face obstacles. This demand creates frustration and what I call low frustration tolerance. Let me give you an example. You're working toward a goal and you hit a setback. If you're thinking, well, this is harder than I hoped, but I can keep going, that's a preference. You'll feel disappointed, maybe discouraged, but you'll persist. But if you're thinking I shouldn't have to work this hard, this is too difficult, I can't stand this, that's a demand. And now you want to give up. You're not just facing a difficult situation, you're telling yourself it's unbearable, it's awful, it shouldn't be this way. Here's the thing. Life isn't fair. It never has been, and it never will be. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. You can work hard and not get the result you want. Other people can work less hard and get better results. That's reality. And when you demand that reality be different, when you insist that life must be fair and easy, you're setting yourself up for constant frustration and suffering. This demand leads to victimhood, to giving up easily, to avoiding challenges because they shouldn't be so challenging. It's one of the biggest obstacles to achievement and happiness. Now here's what's crucial to understand about these 3 demands. They're different from preferences. Listen to this carefully because people get confused about this. A preference is I really want this, and I'll be disappointed if I don't get it. A demand is I absolutely must have this, and it's terrible if I don't. The demand adds rigid, absolutistic thinking that creates disturbance. I'm not telling you to stop wanting things. I'm not telling you to lower your standards or stop caring. I'm telling you to stop demanding. Want things intensely. Prefer them strongly. Work hard for them. But don't tell yourself they absolutely must happen or it's the end of the world. Because that's what creates your suffering. Let me tell you about a client I worked with years ago. She came to me absolutely miserable in her marriage. Every session, she'd tell me about all the things her husband was doing wrong. He didn't listen to her the way he should. He didn't help around the house the way he must. He didn't show affection the way he had to. And she was furious all the time, constantly angry, constantly resentful. Now, were some of her complaints valid? Sure, her husband wasn't perfect, but neither was she. The problem wasn't his behavior. The problem was her demands. She was demanding that he be different than he was. She was demanding that he read her mind, meet her needs without her having to ask clearly, and basically be exactly what she wanted exactly when she wanted it. We worked on changing those demands to preferences. I really want him to help more around the house, so I'm going to have a calm conversation about dividing chores. I prefer that he show affection this way, and I'll tell him what I need instead of expecting him to know. I wish he were different in these ways, but he's a fallible human being, not a terrible person. And you know what happened? Her anger decreased dramatically. And when she wasn't constantly enraged, she could actually communicate effectively. And guess what? Her husband started responding better because he wasn't being attacked all the time. The marriage didn't become perfect, but became good enough. And she was happy. Compare that to another client who came in with the same complaints, refused to give up her demands, and ended up divorced, and just as angry at her next partner because she brought the same demanding beliefs with her. So now you know the 3 demands. But here's something really important I need to tell you. There's a difference between healthy and unhealthy negative emotions. And this is a game changer once you understand it. Most people think any negative emotion is bad, and they should try to think positive all the time. That's garbage. You should feel bad when bad things happen. The question is, Do you feel the healthy kind of bad or the unhealthy kind of bad? Let me explain. There are healthy negative emotions based on preferences and unhealthy negative emotions based on demands. And you want the healthy ones. Take anxiety versus concern. Anxiety is when you're thinking, I must not fail this test or it's awful. That's a demand. Anxiety is paralyzing. It makes your mind race, makes you freeze up, makes you avoid studying because thinking about the test makes you too anxious. Concern is when you're thinking, I really prefer to pass this test, so let me prepare well. That's a preference. Concern is motivating. It makes you study, makes you take it seriously, but it doesn't paralyze you. Both feel uncomfortable, but one helps you and one hurts you. That's the difference. Or we'll take depression versus sadness. Depression is when something bad happens and you think I must have this relationship, or I'm completely unlovable. I'm a total failure. Life is hopeless. That's a demand leading to a global rating of yourself. Depression makes you feel worthless, makes you give up, creates hopelessness. Sadness is when you think I really wanted this relationship to work, and I'm genuinely disappointed it didn't. That's a preference focused on the event. Sadness lets you grieve, lets you feel the pain, but you can still function. You can still know you have worth. You can still move forward when you're ready. The key difference is sadness is about rating what happened. Depression is about rating your entire self. And rating yourself based on external events is irrational and destructive. Or take rage versus healthy anger. Rage is when someone treats you badly and you think you absolutely must not treat me this way. You terrible person. That's a demand that damns the entire person. Rage destroys relationships, creates grudges, makes you do things you regret, keeps you stuck in resentment. Healthy anger is when you think I really don't like what you did, and I'm going to address it firmly. That's a preference focused on the behavior. Healthy anger protects your boundaries, helps you be assertive, lets you address problems without destroying relationships. You can be firm. You can be direct. You can set strong boundaries. You don't have to be disturbed to do those things. In fact, you'll do them better when you're not disturbed. Or take shame versus regret. Shame is when you make a mistake and think I should have done better. I'm a complete failure. I'm a bad person. That's a demand that damns your whole self. Shame makes you hide, makes you avoid taking responsibility, makes you likely to repeat the mistake because you can't face it. Regret is when you think I wish I'd handled that differently, and I'll learn from it. That's a preference focused on your behavior. Regret leads to taking responsibility, making amends, learning, and changing. Do you see the pattern? Healthy negative emotions acknowledge that something bad happened, you don't like it, and you're going to cope with it or address it. Unhealthy negative emotions insist that it absolutely must not have happened. It's awful that it did, and you can't stand it. And here's what people don't get. I'm not asking you to suppress your feelings or pretend everything's fine. That's toxic positivity, and I hate that. Feel bad when bad things happen. Just feel the healthy version of bad that helps you cope and take action, not the unhealthy version that makes you suffer and get stuck. Think about two people who both get cut off in traffic. One has road rage. He's furious for the next hour, drives aggressively, ruins his whole morning, shows up at work in a terrible mood. The other has healthy annoyance. He thinks, wow, that was rude and dangerous, and he's over it in 30 seconds. Same event, completely different consequences. The difference? One demanded that this must not happen. The other preferred it hadn't happened, but accepted that bad drivers exist. Now let me show you how this actually works in your mind, because this is where all your power lies. It's called the ABC model, and once you understand this, you can change your emotional life. Most people think that events cause emotions directly. Something happens, and you feel a certain way. Event causes emotion. A cause is C, but that's not accurate. There's something in between. It goes activating event, belief, consequence. ABC. Your beliefs about the event create your emotional response, not the event itself. Let me walk you through this with an example. Let's say your boss criticizes your work. That's A, the activating event. Now, most people think a cause is C. Boss criticizes me, therefore I feel anxious and upset. But that's not what's happening. There's B in the middle. Your belief about the criticism. If your belief is he absolutely must respect me, this is awful. I'm a failure. That's a demanding belief. And that belief creates C, the consequence. Anxiety, maybe anger, avoidance of your boss, difficulty sleeping. But if your belief is I prefer he appreciate my work, but criticism isn't catastrophic, I can learn from valid points and dismiss invalid ones. That's a preferential belief. And that belief creates a different C. Maybe some disappointment or concern, but you can still function well, address the feedback rationally, and move forward. Same A, different B, completely different C. And this is incredibly empowering once you really get it. Because you can't always control A. Events happen. Life happens. Other people do what they do. And you can't directly control C. Your emotions arise from your beliefs. But you can control B. You can work on your belief system. And when you change B, you change C. Let me give you another example. Two people both get rejected after a job interview. Same A. Person one has the belief, I must get this job. This rejection means I'm a failure. I'll never succeed. That's a demanding belief. So C is depression, giving up on job hunting, feeling hopeless. Person two has the belief, I really wanted this job, but rejection is part of the process. I'm disappointed, but I'll keep applying. That's a preferential belief. So C is disappointment, but they apply to 5 more jobs that week. Same event, different beliefs, completely different outcomes. Do you see how much power this gives you? You're not a victim of circumstances. You're creating your emotional disturbance with your beliefs, which means you can uncreate it by changing your beliefs. Now, how do you identify your B, your beliefs, especially your demanding beliefs? Here's what to listen for. The words must, should, have to, need to, ought to. When you catch yourself using those words in an absolute way, that's a demand. Also listen for awfulizing language. It's terrible, it's horrible, I can't stand it, this is the worst thing ever. That's usually connected to a demand. And notice when you're thinking in black and white extremes. I'm a complete failure. He's a terrible person. This always happens to me. That absolutistic thinking usually comes from demands. And here's a really useful clue. Notice your emotional intensity. If your emotion seems way out of proportion to what happened, that's a sign that a demand is operating. You're not just disappointed, you're devastated. You're not just annoyed, you're enraged. You're not just concerned, you're having a panic attack. That intensity is the alarm bell that says check your beliefs. There's probably a demand here. So you've identified the demand. Now what? This is where D comes in. D is for disputing. You dispute the demand. You challenge it. You ask it for evidence. And here's how you do it. Ask yourself, where's the evidence that this must be different? Where's the law of the universe that says this should not happen? Is there really a rule that says I must succeed, or people must treat me well, or life must be fair? And if you're honest, the answer is no. There's no such rule. You want it to be that way. You prefer it strongly. But there's no evidence that it must be that way. Ask yourself, is this really awful? Now, awful should mean the worst possible thing. It should mean 100% bad. Nothing could be worse. Is missing a deadline really awful? Is being rejected really awful? Or is it very bad, quite unfortunate, highly inconvenient, but not actually the end of the world? Be honest. Almost nothing in daily life is truly awful. Ask yourself, can I really not stand this? Or is it just really hard, really uncomfortable, really not what I wanted? Because not standing something means you die or disintegrate, and you're still here. So clearly you can stand it, even though you don't like it. This disputing process disrupts the demand. It shows you that your demand isn't based on reality. It's based on your preference that you've rigidified into an absolute. And then comes E. E is for effective new philosophy. This is where you replace the demand with a rational, preferential belief. You take that rigid demand and you make it flexible. So instead of I must succeed, you think I strongly prefer to succeed, and I'll work hard toward it. But if I don't succeed, I'm disappointed, not worthless. I can learn from it and try again. Instead of you must treat me well, you think I want you to treat me well, and I'll address it if you don't, but you're a fallible human who sometimes acts badly, not an evil person. Instead of life must be fair, you think I wish life were fair, but it often isn't, and I can handle that reality even though I don't like it. The new belief keeps your preference. You still want good things. You still have standards. You still pursue your goals. But you've removed the demand. You made it flexible. And that flexibility is what allows you to stay mentally strong when things don't go your way. Let me go back to that example of the two people losing their jobs. Person one, the one who got depressed for 6 months, their ABC looked like this. A is job loss. B is I absolutely must have job security. This should not have happened. I can't stand this. I'm a failure. C is depression, staying in bed, not applying to new jobs, feeling hopeless. Person two, the one who moved forward after a week, their ABC looked like this. A is job loss. B is I really wanted to keep that job, and I'm quite disappointed, but job loss happens. I can handle this, and I'm going to focus on finding something new. C is sadness and concern, but taking action, applying to jobs, networking, moving forward. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds like I'm just lowering my standards. If I stop demanding, won't I stop achieving? Won't I become mediocre? This is a really important misconception, so let me address it directly. Demands actually decrease your performance and achievement. Strong preferences increase your motivation and resilience. You'll accomplish more when you stop demanding and start flexibly preferring. Let me explain why. When you demand that you must succeed, what happens? You become afraid of failure. And fear of failure creates anxiety. And anxiety hijacks your rational thinking. It makes you freeze up, procrastinate, avoid situations where you might fail, or choke under pressure. You're so focused on I can't fail that you can't focus on doing well. Think about athletes who choke in big moments. What's happening? They're demanding they must perform perfectly. And that demand creates so much anxiety that they perform worse than usual. Compare that to athletes who perform brilliantly under pressure. What's different? They strongly prefer to win. They want it intensely, but they've accepted that sometimes you lose. And that acceptance keeps them relaxed enough to access their skills. Same thing happens in every area of life. When you're terrified of failing because you've demanded you must succeed, you either avoid trying or you're too anxious to perform well. But when you strongly prefer to succeed, but accept that failure is possible and not catastrophic, you take smart risks. You try new things. You learn faster because mistakes don't mean you're a mistake. They're just information. You persist longer because setbacks are just problems to solve, not proof that you're worthless. Here's another way to think about it. You can have incredibly high standards and flexible beliefs at the same time. A preference can be I'm going to work extremely hard to achieve excellence because I value it deeply. A demand is I absolutely must achieve excellence or I'm worthless. The first one drives you forward with motivation and persistence. The second one paralyzes you with fear and creates disturbance. The most successful people I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of high achievers, they all had one thing in common. They preferred success intensely, but they accepted that failure happens. They didn't rate their entire self based on outcomes. They rated their effort. They learned from mistakes, and they kept going. That's what sustainable achievement looks like. Let me give you some real-world applications. Job hunting. You prefer to get the job. You prepare thoroughly. You present yourself well. You follow up professionally. But you accept that rejection happens, and it doesn't mean you're unemployable or worthless. So you can handle rejection without falling apart, and you keep applying until you get the right fit. Dating. You prefer to find a great partner. You put yourself out there, you're authentic, you work on being your best self. But you accept that not everyone will be interested, and being single isn't awful. So you can handle rejection without taking it as proof you're unlovable, and you keep meeting people until you find someone compatible. Starting a business. You prefer your venture succeeds. You work incredibly hard. You make smart decisions. You adapt when needed. But you accept that many businesses fail, and failure wouldn't mean you're a failure as a person. So you can take calculated risks, learn from mistakes, and pivot when necessary. Parenting. You prefer your kids make good choices. You guide them, teach them, set appropriate boundaries. But you accept they're separate people who will make mistakes and have their own paths. so you can let them struggle and learn without controlling everything or blaming yourself for their choices. In every case, the preference keeps you in action. The demand creates disturbance that interferes with effective action. High standards plus flexible beliefs equals sustainable achievement. High standards plus rigid demands equals anxiety, avoidance, and often mediocrity. All right, so we've covered the theory. You know about the three demands, healthy versus unhealthy emotions, the ABC model, and why preferences beat demands for achievement. Now let me give you practical tools you can use starting today. These are techniques to catch and change your demands in real time, building genuine mental strength. First tool is the must hunt. For 1 week, carry a note card or use your phone notes. Every time you catch yourself thinking must, should, have to, need to, ought to, write it down. Don't try to change it yet. Just notice how often you demand. You'll be shocked. Most people find they're demanding things dozens of times a day. I must get this done. You should be more considerate. I have to make a good impression. They ought to appreciate me. Life needs to be easier. Just becoming aware of these demands is incredibly valuable because you can't change what you don't notice. Second tool is the catastrophe scale. When something bad happens, rate it from 0 to 100, where 100 is the absolute worst thing you can imagine. Really the worst. And be honest. Is your friend being 15 minutes late really a 70 on that scale? Or is it a 10? Is missing a deadline really a 90? Or is it a 30? This helps you see when you're awfulizing, making things worse in your mind than they are in reality. And here's the thing. If you're honest, almost nothing in daily life is above a 40. Maybe a serious health diagnosis or loss of a loved one gets up into the 70s or 80s. But everyday frustrations, they're 10s and 20s. Seeing that helps you stop treating minor problems like catastrophes. Third tool is the says who technique. When you catch a demand, ask says who. Where's the rule? People must be on time. Says who? Where's a universal law that says people must never be late? I need everyone to like me. Says who? Where's the evidence that you need approval to survive? Life should be easier. Says who? Where's the guarantee that life should be easy? This question disrupts the demand by highlighting that there is no actual rule. It's just your preference that you've turned into a false must. And once you see that, you can consciously replace it. I prefer people be on time, and I'll address chronic lateness, but there's no law that says they must be. Fourth tool is rational self-statements, sometimes called coping statements. These are phrases you create ahead of time in practice, so they're ready when you need them. Write down 3 to 5 statements that directly counter your most common demands. Things like I can handle disappointment. It's uncomfortable, but not unbearable. I prefer success, but failure doesn't make me a failure. People sometimes treat me poorly, and while I don't like it, I can cope. Life isn't always fair, and I can tolerate that reality. My worth doesn't depend on any single outcome. Pick statements that resonate with you and repeat them regularly. Not just when you're upset, but daily, so they become part of your thinking. Fifth tool is shame attacking exercises. Now this one takes courage, but it's incredibly powerful. Do something mildly embarrassing on purpose. Not to harm anyone, just to violate your own, I must not look foolish demand. Maybe sing loudly in a public place for a few seconds. Maybe wear 2 different colored shoes to the grocery store. Maybe tell a joke that falls flat. The goal is to discover that the world doesn't end when you look foolish. People might notice and think you're odd for a moment, then they forget about you and move on with their lives. This builds real confidence because you prove to yourself that you can handle disapproval and embarrassment. It's liberating to realize you can survive looking bad. Sixth tool is the and so what chain. Take a demand to its logical conclusion. I must get this promotion. And so what if you don't? Well, I'd be really disappointed. And so what? I'd feel like a failure. And so what? I guess I'd still be me with other opportunities and people who care about me. See how the catastrophe falls apart when you follow it through? Usually what you think you can't stand, you discover you actually can stand. It would be hard and disappointing, but not unbearable. Let me tell you about someone who used these tools. A guy came to see me with terrible social anxiety. He demanded that people must like him and he must never look foolish. He'd avoided social situations for years. We did shame-attacking exercises. I had him approach strangers and tell them he was doing a survey on the most boring topic he could think of, just to experience being rejected and seeming awkward. And you know what he discovered? Most people politely declined and walked away. A few people were rude. Nobody attacked him. The world kept turning. And gradually, his anxiety decreased because he'd proven to himself that he could survive disapproval. His demand for approval lost its power. Now, one more thing I want to address because it's important. Some of you are thinking this sounds cold. What about passion? What about caring deeply about things? Am I saying you should be some kind of emotionless robot? Absolutely not. You could be intensely passionate, deeply caring, and highly motivated without demanding. In fact, you'll be more effective because you won't be emotionally disturbed. This is the real formula for mental strength. You can want something with every fiber of your being. You can work incredibly hard for your goals. You can care deeply about causes, people, and outcomes. The difference is you accept that despite your best efforts, you might not get it. And that acceptance doesn't weaken you. It strengthens you. When you're not terrified of failure, you take bold action. When you're not enraged by setbacks, you problem solve effectively. When you're not depressed by rejection, you try again faster. Mental strength isn't about never feeling bad. It's about not disturbing yourself with demands. You can feel disappointed, sad, frustrated, and still function well. That's what resilience actually looks like. Let me tell you about 3 types of unconditional acceptance that make this possible. First is unconditional self-acceptance. This means you have worth as a human being, period. Not because of what you achieve or what people think of you or how you perform. Just because you exist. You're a fallible human who sometimes does well and sometimes screws up, and that's okay. Your worth isn't on the table. This doesn't mean you accept bad behavior from yourself. It means you rate your behaviors, not your entire self. I acted badly in that situation, and I'm going to do better is unconditional self-acceptance. I'm a bad person because I acted badly is conditional self-rating, and it creates shame and gets in the way of change. Second is unconditional other acceptance. This means people have worth even when they act badly. Your boss is worth even when he's unfair. Your partner has worth even when they're inconsiderate. Other drivers have worth even when they cut you off. They're fallible humans doing fallible things. This doesn't mean you accept mistreatment. It means you address bad behavior without damning the entire person. You can be firm, set boundaries, even end relationships if needed, all without disturbing yourself with rage. Third is unconditional life acceptance. This means life is good and bad, fair and unfair, easy and hard, and you can handle all of it even when you don't like it. This doesn't mean you're passive or you don't try to improve things. It means you work to change what you can while accepting what you can't. You prefer better circumstances, but you don't demand them. These 3 types of acceptance, self, others, and life, create a foundation of strength. You're not fragile. You're not dependent on everything going your way. You can face reality as it is and still move forward effectively. Now here's the beautiful thing about this approach. When you live with strong preferences instead of rigid demands, you become both passionate and peaceful. You care deeply about things and you work hard for them, but you're holding it all with an open hand instead of clenched fist. You say, I deeply prefer this outcome, and I'll give it everything I've got, and I'll cope if it doesn't happen. That's the sweet spot. Maximum motivation, minimum disturbance. You're driven, but not anxious. You're committed, but not desperate. You care, but you're not devastated when things don't work out. That's what mental strength looks like. Think of it like a bamboo tree versus an oak tree in a storm. The oak tree is rigid. It demands to stay upright exactly as it is. And when the storm comes, the oak breaks. The bamboo tree prefers to stay upright, but it bends with the wind. It's flexible, and the bamboo survives and thrives. That's what you want to be. Flexible strength. Strong preferences with the ability to bend when reality pushes back. So here we are. Let me bring this all together because this is important. You learn that your emotional suffering comes from 3 types of demands. Demands about yourself. You must perform perfectly. Demand about others. they must treat you well. And demands about life, it must be easy and fair. These demands create unhealthy negative emotions that disturb you and interfere with effective action. You learn the difference between healthy negative emotions like sadness and concern that come from preferences and unhealthy emotions like depression and anxiety that come from demands. The healthy ones help you cope. The unhealthy ones make you suffer. You got the ABC model. Your beliefs about events, not the events themselves, create your emotions. A is the activating event. B is your belief, especially your demanding belief. C is the consequence, your emotion and behavior. And because B creates C, you have power. You can't always control what happens, but you can always work on how you interpret and respond. You learned that demands actually hurt your performance, while strong preferences help it. You can have incredibly high standards and be deeply passionate without demanding that life comply with your wishes. In fact, that's how you achieve more and suffer less. And you got practical tools. The must hunt to catch your demands. The catastrophe scale to check your awfulizing. The says who technique to dispute demands. Rational self-statements to practice flexible thinking. Shame attacking to build real confidence. And so what chain to follow your catastrophes to their logical conclusion and discover they're not as terrible as you thought. These aren't just ideas. They're your daily mental strength workout. Use them. Practice them. They work. Here's what I want you to remember as you go into 2026. You are not fragile. You can handle disappointment. You can tolerate discomfort. You can survive disapproval. You can cope with unfairness. You are far more resilient than your demands make you feel. The question isn't whether bad things will happen this year. They will. They happen to everyone. The question is, will you disturb yourself about them? Or will you feel appropriately bad and then take effective action? Will you demand that life be different than it is? Or will you prefer your desired outcomes while accepting reality as it comes? Stop demanding that life be different than it is. Start preferring, wanting, desiring, even passionately, but with flexibility. That's where real strength lives. Not in never having problems. Not in always getting what you want, but in facing whatever comes with rational thinking and healthy emotion that lets you keep moving forward. Now, if you want to take this further, I got another video you need to watch. It's called The Anger Cure, How to Stop Raging and Start Living. Here's why you should click on it right now. Anger and rage destroy more relationships, careers, and opportunities than almost any other emotion. Most people think anger just happens to them. Someone does something wrong and boom, you're angry. But that's not how it works. You create your anger with specific demands. And more importantly, I'm going to show you how to have healthy annoyance instead that actually helps you set boundaries and solve problems without destroying relationships or ruining your day. If you found this video valuable, that one's going to give you the exact blueprint for handling conflict and frustration without losing your mind. Click it right now. It's the perfect follow-up to everything we just covered. And hey, if you got something out of this video, let me know in the comments. Tell me which demand you're going to work on first. I read them, and your insights help other people too. Stop demanding. Start living. I'll see you in the next one.